Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust the week's gone well, they fly by and it's nearly the end of the year. Let me start with macro thoughts. White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow says talks over the first phase of a trade deal are down to the short strokes. As I wrote over the weekend, I was quoting Northman trader who said recycle the same headline over and over again, and each time markets jump and each time it means nothing, he tweeted. You know why algos buy unsubstantiated headlines? Because they're stupid. And that took me back to Cambridge Analytica's now infamous Andrew Nix, who said we just put information into the bloodstream to the internet and then watch it grow, give it a little push every now and again over time to watch it take shape. And there's a tremendous convergence there, isn't there, between the communication strategy of the White House and Cambridge Analytica. Home thoughts. This was the sunrise one morning from Nomads in Diani Beach, which is one of the best beaches in the world and one of my favorite places to visit. We've also stayed at a place called 420 South. This was a photograph I took there early in the morning without any filter, and that's a beautiful beach. In fact, I would rate that the best beach. And this is a photograph of Hannah and I on the beach. She was swimming in the sea in the evening and it was just such a special moment. And I'll never forget it now that she's so grown up. Gedi ruins is further north of Diani, quite some distance, and it was settled by the Bantu-speaking people, Bantu-speaking Swahili between the 12th and 16th century. Beads from Venice, coins, a Ming vase from China, an iron lamp from India, and scissors from Spain have all been found there. From the 13th or 14th to the 17th centuries, Gedi was a thriving community along the jungle coast of East Africa. No written record exists of this town. Excavations between 1948 and 1958 revealed that the Muslim inhabitants traded with people from all over the world. Some of the findings, as I said, included beads from Venice, coins, a Ming vase from China, an iron lamp from India, and scissors from Spain. These houses were complex for their time, with bathrooms, with drains and overhead basins to flush toilets. The city streets were laid out at right angles and had drainage gutters. Really an extraordinary place to visit, and we visited it a couple of times. It's now abandoned. The site is inhabited by Guinon monkeys, which frequently interact with visitors. According to local tradition, the ruins are protected by the spirits of its priests. These old ones supposedly curse anyone who harms the site or removes anything. This is a photograph of the ruins of Gedi that I took at sunset. Obiter Dictum 101 tweeted, "I am all religions, yet none," and he published a photograph of the Sufi dance, which I watched once in the basement of the mausoleum for Rumi, and it was a very intoxicating experience. Political reflections. This was a clip from Jair Bolsonaro. Primeiras damas do Brasil e África do Sul. Boa noite a todos. And it's quite an extraordinary short clip of about 45 seconds. Do dial it up. It's on rich wrap-ups. He, of course, at Unga said, "You shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free." And he spoke of trails of death and destruction, ideologically infected human souls, and biologically perverted children. Foreign Affairs is leading with an article, Venezuela's Suicide Lessons from a Failed State. I've written about Venezuela several times. In February 2019, I said Maduro's, I'm afraid, going down just like Muammar went down, and as did Saddam. He's still there, of course. In that same article, I was quoting Hunter S. Thompson, The Edge. There is no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. The Chavez revolution was always a rebellion in the superpower's backyard, and the machine was eventually going to bring it to heel by hook or by crook, in my opinion. And also, you will recall, Trump is relishing his financial warfare strategies, and even, I think, in a US operation, attacked Maduro with a remote-controlled drone. Reuters Special Reports has a fascinating investigative piece into elite police force spreads terror in the barrios of Venezuela. Before daybreak on January the 8th, several dozen police officers swept through the streets of Barrio Kennedy, a hillside slum outside Venezuela's capital. Some of the officers came under fire from assailants unprompted. They shot back, hitting 5 young men. The 5 were then taken to a hospital where they died of their wounds. That, at least, is the official account, detailed in a statement the next day by the elite unit that conducted the operation, the Special Action Force of the Venezuelan National Police. Brother, says Jose Arevalo, a 29-year-old shop worker who had been convicted of robbery earlier this decade but avoided legal trouble since, don't kill me. If you collaborate, you'll go free, responds an unidentified officer wearing black fatigues and a balaclava. Otherwise, you're going to die. He died. Maduro called the report biased. This is a UN report in July which denounced FAES executions and called on Maduro to dissolve the force. And in a nationally televised speech, he shouted defiantly, "Long live the FAES." The FAES is a tool of Maduro's own devising. He established the force in July 2017 as he faced a surge in violent crime that followed the collapse of Venezuela's oil-based economy. Maduro uses the FAES whenever he needs a unit that is completely under his control to carry out whatever attack, whatever atrocity, said Zaire Mandure, a former deputy chief prosecutor who left Venezuela after falling out with Maduro 2 years ago. The wounds are precise and in the same place, said the director of a trauma unit where many victims of FAES shootings had been taken. The doctor, like many other local specialists consulted for the story, spoke on condition he not be identified. Venezuela's government doesn't publish official figures for FAES killings. Internal government data reviewed by Reuters show 5,280 people died at the hands of all the country's police after resisting authority last year. That marks a 160% increase from 2016. By the time Chavez died in 2013, the murder rate had quadrupled to one of the highest on the planet, nearly 80 homicides per 100,000 residents, according to the Observatory of Violence, or nearly 20 times that of the United States at the time. Maduro, a fiery former bus driving union leader, took over in April 2013 and declared crime a priority. Then talking about an officer, this lady goes to find her son and an officer told her FAES headquarters here is the morgue. He suggested she go there to look. There, the mother said she found the body. So that all sort of confirms what Hunter S. Thompson was saying. The Edge, there is no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. Joshua Wong told German media a while ago, Hong Kong is das neue Berlin. Look at this, wow, what a scene, what a shot. Thousands of Hong Kong attended this rally in support of firefighters and paramedics at Edinburgh Square. They are true heroes as well. You know that quote of mine, I said it is not possible to Xinjiang, Hong Kong, I think. Well, Zeynep in The Atlantic is saying Hong Kong protests are in their 5th month despite an escalating crackdown. How? One surprising answer, the fate of China's Uyghurs. They've decided that they might as well go down fighting. And the article, the Hong Kong protesters aren't driven by hope, we might as well go down fighting. The mask ban of early October was supposed to slow protesters down, but the very first day after that ban, I watched streams of protesters in masks and helmets make their way to their usual haunts on Hong Kong Island. The government shut down many of the subway lines that day, a practice that has become a de facto curfew because Hong Kong's uber-efficient subway system is the way most people get around. One of the most popular chants in Hong Kong is 5 demands, not one less. These include the full withdrawal of the anti-extradition bill, which originally sparked the protests in June, an independent commission to investigate police misconduct, retracting the riot charges against protesters, amnesty for arrested protesters, and crucially, universal suffrage. Carrie gave a press conference and in chilling language called the protesters the enemy of the people. She was voted into office by 777 people from the 1,200-person election committee, many of whose members are business people with close ties to mainland China. It's fair to describe her as hand-picked by Beijing. Polls in October showed her popularity at around 22%. Many are tired. Some surveys suggest that more than 80% of the people of Hong Kong may have been exposed to tear gas, an astonishing figure. I can't put a mask on my dog, one resident tearfully explained to me, as others distributed posters of puppies and kittens in protest gear, wearing helmets and masks and holding bottles of Pocari Sweat, the electrolyte mixture that has become the unofficial drink of the protests. Electrolyte drinks are great if you're walking long distances in humid weather, as so many in Hong Kong do almost every weekend. Hong Kong's government, backed by mainland China, has responded to this with all the finesse of a control freak who has lost control. Whatever else might be happening, this unelected government isn't winning any hearts and minds. Maybe outright intimidation will work instead. Aren't you afraid? I asked gingerly. We are afraid, they quickly admitted. They even giggled, but it got serious quickly. This is our last chance, they said very matter-of-factly. If we stand down, nothing will stand between us and mainland China, they said. They talked about Xinjiang and what China had done to the Uyghur minority. I've heard about the fate of the Uyghurs from so many protesters over the months. China may have wanted to make an example out of the region, but the lesson Hong Kongers took was in the other direction. Resist with all your might, because if you lose once, there will be a catastrophe for your people, and the world will ignore it. We cannot give up, because if we do, there will be no future for us anyway. We might as well go down fighting. And I wrote severally about Xinjiang. Last time was the 21st of October, and I said, unless we're now going to Xinjiang the whole world, the current modus operandi is running on empty. 1 million people are jailed at China's gulags. I managed to escape. Here's what was really going on inside, was an article in Haaretz.com. Children are being taken from their parents who are confined in concentration camps and being put in Chinese orphanages. Women in the camps are receiving inoculations that make them infertile. 21st of October, I was talking about the crusher of bones, Xi Jinping, and his algorithmic control. See this poster. Next to it is a banner raised on November the 2nd. Police ban everything, but people march anyway. Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong. We'd rather die on our feet than to live on our knees. It's not only a statement on the wall. Students at Chinese university showed us they mean it. So really it remains highly volatile. And unless they're simply going to crush it on the basis that the Americans will say nothing because they're so keen on that trade deal. Speaker Pelosi, if the president has something that is exculpatory, Mr. President, that means, do you have anything that shows your innocence? Then he should make that known. So far we haven't seen that, but we welcome it. She really is a tremendous lady, as I've said before. Nervous Nancy Pelosi, his moniker, which is probably a linguistic transference of a sort. UK elections, the biggest news yet. Boris Johnson will be fighting for his Uxbridge seat alongside, among others, Lord Buckethead, Count Binface, Yace Interplanetary Time Lord, Jorgenstein, Bobby Elmo Smith. And I wrote about Boris on the 5th of August. What's your road, man? Holy Boy Road, Madman Road, Rainbow Road, Guppy Road, any road. It's an anywhere road for anybody, anyhow, where, body, how. Currency markets, let's take a look at that. The euro, 110.20, dollar index, 98.156. The Japanese yen has been strengthening, 108.58. Swiss franc, 0.9829. The pound, 128.79. The Australian dollar, which had a terrible session yesterday, 0.6795, I think it's very oversold. India rupee, 71.755. South Korean won, 1167.16. Brazilian real has blown out, 4.1957. Egyptian pound, they cut rates at 16.1292. And the rand a little bit firmer, 14.7845. Dollar index 98.153 remains well supported. Euro dollar 110.21, briefly dipped below 110. I think we see a gradual recovery here, back up to 111. Streamers, Netflix market cap $124 billion. Disney market cap $267 billion. That's from the market here. You remember I wrote about Netflix on the 23rd of September when I said I therefore am putting out a conviction buy on Netflix at Friday's closing price of $270.75. I said Netflix is not a US business, it is a global business. The majority of analysts are in the US, and in my opinion these same analysts have an international blind spot. Once investors appreciate the story is an international one for Netflix and not a US one anymore, we will see the price ramp to fresh all-time highs. And to wit, US hedge funds bought shares of Facebook and Netflix despite steep declines in the technology darlings during a volatile third quarter. Tesla has surpassed Daimler in stock market value. As it invests in the German automaker's backyard, Tesla is now worth 56.5 billion euros versus Daimler's 55.4 billion euros. That's Holger. As I said on October 26, I have to commend Elon Musk because he has taught the world about what a short squeeze looks like. The share price is up about 100% in a very short space of time. Commodity markets, gold, 1464 trading. An update on Aramco IPO's valuations from the banks and the deal, including a few extra names. That's from Javier Blas. Bank of America, $1.22 to $2.27 trillion. Goldman, $1.6 trillion to $2.3 trillion. HSBC, $1.59 trillion to $2.1 trillion. BNP Paribas 1.42 trillion, Morgan Stanley 106 to 2.025 trillion, RBC 1.3 trillion to 2.2 trillion. Those ranges are just mind-boggling. I think they're trying to keep the Crown Prince happy with these with the high side of the range. Crude oil chart, interesting session yesterday. We got as high as 57.85, then we came off and we're now at 57. but I think we're going to see 58 plus by the close of business tonight. Diamonds not forever. Look at the slumping sales for De Beers Group. Soaring Indian onion prices raise risk of political fallout. That's from Chi Girl. Onion prices in India have soared to eye-watering heights, leading to worries about food inflation and consumer unrest amid declining availability of one of the country's most important vegetables. Africa. Libya's prime minister says Russia's mercenaries will drag out the war. Libya's internationally recognized prime minister said Russian mercenaries backing his rival Khalifa Haftar will drag out a months-long war in the North African oil producer and urged the US to act to restore peace. Hundreds of mercenaries with the Russian Wagner group, headed by President Putin's associate Yevgeny Prigozhin, are fighting alongside Haftar's eastern-based Libyan National Army in a stalled offensive to take the capital Tripoli and dislodge Sarraj's government, according to Western and Russian officials. Wagner troops had fought in Ukraine and Syria before deploying in September to Libya. A person close to the Kremlin told Bloomberg at the time that Russia was distancing itself from the administration in Tripoli and expected Haftar, who already controls eastern and southern Libya and much of its oil fields, to gain the upper hand after his initial failure to push into the capital in April. He said he's also raised concerns about billions of Libyan dinars printed in Russia and supplied to Haftar and the Tobruk government. This is a method of financing the war, he said, noting Malta's seizure of a ship carrying Libyan banknotes believed to have been destined for Haftar. The UAE and Egypt have backed Haftar while Turkey supports Sarraj's government. The United States, as a democratic country, holds the banner of defending human rights. It has to intervene to stop the aggressors' militias from committing systematic violations against civilians, Sarraj said, calling on Washington to participate in a clear manner in restoring security and stability. But of course, Trump took a call from Haftar not too long ago. There can be no economic reforms when a whole parallel currency is being printed, he said. 28th of October, I wrote an article from Russia with love, and I said I would argue Putin's timing is exquisite and optimal, and his model has an exponential ROI. And you're seeing that model being deployed right now. Russia's clout on African soil runs on many tracks. Its expansion is geared primarily towards hybrid activities, mercenaries, military equipment, mining investments, nuclear power plants, and railway connections. Andrew Korybiko writes, Moscow invaluably fills the much-needed niche of providing its partners there with democratic security, or, in other words, the cost-effective and low-commitment capabilities needed to thwart color revolutions and resolve unconventional wars, collectively referred to as hybrid war. To simplify, Russia's political technologists have reportedly devised bespoke solutions for confronting incipient and ongoing color revolutions, just like its private military contractors, PMCs, have supposedly done the same when it comes to ending insurgencies. I said, once we look through the optics of two nuclear-capable supersonic bombers belonging to the Russian Air Force landing in Pretoria, then we'll see that this move for what it is, and it is meaningful. Z is fed up and speaks about the end of vanity because the return on investment outside commodities and telecoms for China in Africa is negative. Putin has created a hybrid model with an exponential ROI, and I would imagine he's on speed dial. Charlie Robertson of Renaissance Capital, where fertility rates are low, light green, interest rates should be lower than where fertility rates are high, Nigeria, Angola, etc. One of the most important maps we've done on Africa, Asia top right, where fertility rates are low, light green, interest rates should be lower than where fertility rates are high, Nigeria and Angola. He's got this very interesting thesis. Our big theme this year is demographics and how they explain why some African countries have very low interest rates, Morocco for example, and some have very expensive borrowing costs. Mo Ibrahim at the Paris Peace Forum 2019, where Paul Biya of Cameroon was also attending, said dialogues are better than bullets. More than half of sub-Saharan Africans lack access to electricity. This is The Economist. The continent is home to almost a fifth of the world's population, but accounts for less than 4% of global electricity use. North Africa enjoys near universal access to electricity, yet more than half of the sub-Saharan population, 600 million people, live in the dark. Rural areas are particularly hard hit. Nearly 3/4 of households in cities have access to electricity. In rural places, the figure is close to 1/4. Progress has been painfully slow. Since 2013, the number of Africans without electricity has fallen from 610 million to 595 million. Kenya, Rwanda, Ethiopia performed particularly well. In 2013, roughly 1/4 of Kenyans had access to electricity. Today, 3/4 do. On current plans, the IEA reckons 530 million Africans will still lack electricity in 2030. The IEA says African countries should focus on two groups. One is people who live under the grid in informal urban settlements near a supply of electricity but face cost or other barriers to using it. Africa has a unique opportunity to pursue a much less carbon-intensive development path than many other parts of the world, says Dr. Fatih Birol. For instance, Africa has the richest solar resources on the planet, yet has installed just 1% of the world's solar electricity generation capacity. Charlie Robertson, the lack of electricity is for many countries the most significant obstacle preventing industrialization. Korea's experience in the 20th century says rural access to electricity is not important for industrialization. Senegal plans 2020 Eurobonds as debt costs decline to a record, looking to issue notes denominated in euros. To avoid currency risks, the euro is the peg for the West African CFA franc, the common tender for Guinea-Bissau and 7 francophone nations in the region. And actually, it's an anchor of stability, though a lot of people criticize it as a colonial hangover. Price of Senegalese debt fell below the average of Africa's sovereign issuers for the first time in the quarter through March, as its economic growth forecasts outpaced those of continental peers. The 1 billion euros 2028 notes that Senegal sold at 4.75% in March last year yielded 4.12% in Dakar on Thursday. Since 2008, GDP has expanded 42%, outperforming the global and sub-Saharan Africa's average. Government expects gas production to start as early as 2021, and it stands to receive more than $30 billion over the next 30 years from 2 of its offshore reserves, according to the state-run oil company PetroSen. Especially now that Senegal is becoming a gas producer, we want to be able to supply power through a gas plant and encourage businesses to move to gas and away from diesel. It's a good story, actually. In other African Eurobond news, Angola's hired Deutsche Bank, Standard Chartered and China's ICBC to arrange investor meetings for a 10 and 30-year dollar deal. Life is Them, MC Chambiru and Beverly Tijvinde dance on the road near their craft stall to flag down tourist buses. That's from 2017, pre-Pictet. The Guardian, very beautiful I thought, and this is another Gideon Mendel series, Damage, a testament of faded memory. These images emerge from a time of hope, activism and tragedy. In the 1980s, I was part of a young generation of struggle photographers in South Africa, documenting the fight against apartheid. In 1990, I left a box of my outtakes, negatives and transparencies in storage in Johannesburg, and forgot about it. A few years ago they were returned to me, and I discovered in their many years of neglect the box had been rained on and the top layers had been affected by moisture and mold. South African all shares up 6.63% year to date. Dollar rand, the rand has strengthened a little to 14.7735, but it's still in that range about which I've spoken severally. Egypt cuts interest rates again by 1% this time to 12.25%. They were 16.75% just a year ago. Inflation is now down to 3%. Egyptian pound is very steady at 16.13. EGX 30 is up 11.58% year to date. Nigeria all share is at a 5-month high, but still down 5-week high, but still down 14.6% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 13.14% year to date. The yield on Zambia's $750 million of bonds due in September 2022 rose 42 basis points to a record high of 22.3%, with the price dropping to 66 cents on the dollar. As I've said before, the canary in the coal mine is Zambia. Tanzania plans to more than triple output of cashews to 1 million tons over the next 4 to 5 years and potentially become the biggest exporter of the nuts. Output will increase from an estimated 290,000 tons this season as the government encourages cultivation in more provinces and enhances transparency in the trade, according to the Agriculture Minister. Tanzania's target could affect pricing and supply chains in a market whose 2017-2018 global output was 3.3 million tons, according to the International Nut and Dried Fruit Council. Cashew production in Tanzania dropped to 225,000 tons in the last season from a peak of 223 tons, valued at $578.4 million in 2017-2018 after farmers halted sales in protest against low prices. And of course there was that cashew nut crisis. What happened to that cashew nut crop is a mystery. Why eating bugs is so popular in Congo. At a market in Goma, city in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, an old woman pulls the wings of live grasshoppers and tosses their wriggling bodies into a bucket. She collected the insects from the airport at 5 a.m. that morning and will go back the next day. Grasshopper season has just begun. Throughout November, dozens of grasshopper hunters gather at Goma Airport most mornings. It is one of the few buildings in the city with constant electricity, and the lights that mark the runway attract swarms of the bug. People stuff them into plastic bottles to take to market. Buyers season them with salt and eat them with rice or cassava. It's quite lucrative to sell insects, apparently. Caterpillars are more valuable still. Once they are boiled and salted, a large handful will sell for $1.20, the same price as 10 bananas. Households in Kinshasa, the country's sprawling capital, consume about 300 grams of caterpillars, about 80 if they are averagely juicy, a week. Congolese have been eating bugs for centuries. Our ancestors taught us to eat them to protect us from illnesses. She believes it can even help people infected with HIV. Caterpillars are packed with potassium, calcium, and magnesium. 100 grams of them will provide a person with the required daily intake of each of those minerals. They are richer in protein than beef or fish. A handful is packed with about 500 calories, more than are in a fast food cheeseburger. There you go. Also lead to bad outcomes. The wrong variety of insect can poison consumers. Mrs. Lukambala says she knows which caterpillars to pick because her family has gathered them for generations. The safe kind of redheads and fall out of trees. Your correspondent tried a sample. It was brittle and had a smoky taste. Add one more to the 2 billion people worldwide who chomp insects. Joana Choumali, born in 1974 in the Ivory Coast, based in Abidjan. This series is Ça va aller. These pictures were taken 3 weeks after the terrorist attacks in Grand Bassam, Ivory Coast on 13th March 2016. Kenya, Kiprono was attending a very interesting event on the state of the economy by the Commission on Revenue Allocation. And they said that the Kenyan tax base has contracted 4% of GDP 2018-2019. 57 out of every 100 shillings collected goes to service public debt. 45 of every 100 shillings collected goes to pay salaries. Kenya is back to high debt levels of the early 2000s, says the CRA. This is another graph of sector contribution to GDP, and finally a composition of external debt. Kenya can restructure its debt as done in other countries such as Ethiopia. There is nothing wrong with restructuring, there is everything wrong with defaulting, said Professor Michael Chege. Standard Chartered targets younger African clients with digital loans, small loans via mobile phones as part of a broader effort to capture younger African clients. We're planning to use telecoms data to determine the credit profile of customers for our smaller ticket lending product. With only a few clicks, subscribers in East Africa's largest economy can seek loans of up to $400 from more than 50 providers, pushing many into a debt trap. Look at the food and drink sector. In many markets, the product offering starts with a sachet because that is the customer's purchasing power. You need to build a product where even if you lose out on the ticket size per customer, you make up in the number of products sold. This is where digital comes into play. Get small ticket customers today that becomes a larger ticket customer in the future. Standard Chartered share price data, trading on a trailing PE of 8.683, has not yet reported Q3 earnings. Very strong franchise. UAP issues a profit warning on softening property prices. Predictably, Treasury has announced plans to buy out Air France, KLM, local banks and small investors. Government expects to close the buyout by the end of next year. Kenya Airways share price is also there. Eaagads issued a profits warning statement for full year 2020, citing a dip in coffee production levels due to unpredictable and erratic weather patterns leading to water levels impacting irrigation activities on farms. Rising temperatures contributed to poor flowering. Eaagads, of course, grows coffee, and the market capitalization is just a measly $4 million. Nairobi all share is up 13.11%, and the NSE 20 is down 7%. Thank you for listening. Wishing you a great weekend.